talk to you about politics and liberal values, as well as liberal values and elections. Now, as a political journalist, I follow politics and elections very closely. How do they match with liberal values? Is there a future for liberal values in Indian politics? Now, as we have seen, the high noon of illiberal democracy or authoritarian democracy was the rule of Indira Gandhi. She did institute a phase in which all the organs of democracy were subordinated to the political executive and to political power. During the emergency, as you know, she brought in the 42nd Amendment. This was known as the Constitution of Indira. This gave sweeping powers to Parliament. It gave sweeping powers to Parliament to override the Constitution, to actually change the basic structure of the Constitution, and to make fundamental encroachments on citizens' rights and citizens' freedoms. The 42nd Amendment was the high noon of Indira's political power. Now, when the Janata Party replaced Indira Gandhi, when they came to power in 1977, they brought in their own amendment, which was called the 44th Amendment. Now, the 44th Amendment was even more socialistic and even more about state power than the 42nd Amendment. In fact, ideologically, between Indira Gandhi and the Janata Party, there was a degree of ideological convergence, because Indira had, through the 42nd Amendment, brought in the word socialist and secular into the preamble. These words were not there earlier. Indira inserted them. She inserted the word socialist and secular into the Constitution during the emergency through the 42nd Amendment. Now, through the 44th Amendment, the Janata Party not only did not take out the word socialist and secular, but they deleted the right to property. The right to property ceased to be a fundamental right and actually became only a constitutional right. So the Janata Party was actually more uber socialist than Indira Gandhi, and as you know, the Janata Party also launched a crusade against MNCs like IBM and Coca-Cola, and these were driven out of India. So there was actually a great deal of ideological convergence between the Janata and Indira Gandhi. So the only point of disagreement between the Janata Party and Indira Gandhi was just the personality of Indira Gandhi. So this is why our politics is so personality based, because there is no actually ideological difference. As you know, in the Representation of People's Act, every party, to get registered, has to take the vow of socialism. They have to say that they will be a socialist party. Now, Sharad Joshi, the founder of the Shetkari Sangatana, launched a campaign against this, and he said, why does every political party who has to be registered in India have to take the oath of socialism? Why do you have to have one particular ideology to be in politics? But that's how it happened has happened through successive decades, and therefore there is this ideological convergence between parties. There's no real ideological difference. Because of this high degree of ideological convergence, because your ideas are all the same, your ideas are all populist, nationalist broadly, the only difference there is between you and the opposition is personalities. So you're only calling each other names and abusing each other in terms of personality. In substance, there's no ideological difference between political parties. Now let's look at the four phases broadly of Indian politics: in the Nehru era, in the Indira era, in the post-Indira era, and then the rise of the BJP. Now, the Nehru era was generally, I believe, an era where liberal values were uppermost. Nehru was a convinced constitutional democrat. He was a social liberal, even though he was not an economic liberal, and of course he was a believer in the planned economy and a believer in the state owning the commanding heights of the economy. One of the great follies of Nehru, which ironically the founder of the Jansangh, Shama Prasad Mukherjee, actually raised, was the First Amendment to the Constitution, which abridged the freedom of speech. Now, as a liberal, I do not agree with that First Amendment, that the freedom of speech is contingent on civic peace, on national interest, on being hemmed in by certain conditions. So, the restrictions placed on freedom of speech in the very First Amendment of the Constitution happened during Nehru's tenure. Nehru actually pushed this amendment and restricted freedom of speech in certain circumstances. This, I believe, has not been good for liberal values in politics. As you know, the First Amendment in America actually gives wide-ranging, it gives complete freedom, powers of freedom of speech to American citizens. On the other hand, the First Amendment in India, in the Indian Constitution, restricted freedom of speech. So that, I believe, is an amendment that is justifiably regarded as Nehru's folly. Nehru believed in state action in the economy. He believed in the big state when it came to the economy, that the state should control the commanding heights of the economy, that the state should drive the economy, and this was a belief inherited by Indira Gandhi. But while she inherited the belief in the big state owning the economy, she also inherited, she in fact also pushed a belief in state action in society, in culture, in using state action to steamroller democracy. So, as I have described, she did this in the emergency when she, in fact, jailed the opposition leaders, censored the press, censored rights of habeas corpus, censored basic freedoms, made it possible for Parliament to actually alter the basic structure of the Constitution, brought in amendments that gave overweening powers to Parliament. So she actually took over as part of the so-called Indira Revolution. She took over massive control of the entire democratic system into herself, into her political, into her politics. She made democracy subordinate to her politics. In the post-Indira phase, as I said, ideologically there was convergence between the Janata Party and Indira Gandhi. There was not that much to choose from between the two ideologically, and the Janata Party was not exactly a liberal experiment either. It was riven with disunity. They were quarreling with each other. There was widespread lawlessness. There was economic collapse at that time, which enabled Indira Gandhi to come back as the strong leader. And as you know, she came back in 1980 with a record win. So, in that sense, she came back in 1980 because the Janata had singularly failed to create any kind of alternative to the Indira Gandhi model. And till today, every politician in India does play by the Indira Gandhi playbook. What is the Indira Gandhi playbook? The Indira Gandhi playbook is taking over taking over all power of the democracy into the political executive, overriding Parliament, overriding the judiciary, censoring the press, exercising authoritarian control over a party, a high command culture. As you know, every party today has a high command culture, reaching out directly to voters across the head of the party, in a direct communication between leader and voters. Every political party has this today. Ignoring party structures, not tolerating rivals, not allowing inner party democracy, not allowing debate within the party. This is all part of the Indira political persona, and today every political leader does play by the Indira Gandhi playbook. Now, in the post-Indira era, you had Rajiv Gandhi. He was equally enamored of big state action. As you know, Rajiv Gandhi brought in he tried to bring in the defamation bill curtailing freedom of press. This was opposed. He also brought in the Anti-Defection Act. This, I believe, is fundamentally destroying the right of dissent within political parties, because you can't go against the party line. If you say anything against the party line, you can be expelled. So the Anti-Defection Act, I believe, is a body blow to democratic functioning within parties. You also had him bringing in, you also had Rajiv Gandhi playing all kinds of fundamentalist politics and Hindutva politics. It was the opening of the locks of the Babri Masjid that happened during Rajiv Gandhi's time, the Shilanyas in Babri Masjid that happened during Rajiv Gandhi's time. The Rajiv Gandhi failed the Shah Banu test. So as liberals, if you believe in equality before the law, you had Rajiv Gandhi actually destroy equality before the law by conceding to Muslim personal law when it came to the case of Shah Banu. So what has happened in Indian politics actually since Indira Gandhi, successive governments have actually increased state power and eroded or damaged personal freedoms and individual freedoms. The Ministry of Human Resource Development, I believe, is Rajiv Gandhi's folly. This ministry needs to be shut down yesterday. What is this ministry doing? Pushing its control into textbooks, cultural centers, libraries, arts, academies. The Ministry of Human Resource Development is actually controlling every aspect of our cultural life, education, artistic bodies. There's too much government control. No mature democracy has a censor board like the way we do. We have a censor board appointed by the government with political appointees. The British Broadcasters Film Classification Board only classifies films. The American Motion Pictures Association also classifies films. These are industry bodies which classify films and whose views are not binding on any film producer. In India, you have a censor board with political appointees which can actually tell you don't use this word, don't use that word. The last censor board under Pahlaj Nehalani came up with a list of words, cuss words that filmmakers couldn't use. Today you have certain films which are with alcohol labels blurred out. You have certain scenes which are cut. The Urta Punjab experience where scenes were cut because the censor board wanted these cuts. The censor board is not there to cut films and censor films. The censor board is supposed to be the central board of film classification. You only have to classify adult or children or UA. But on the other hand, it's a gigantic censor. It censors freedom of speech, censors the freedom to make films. Where I think liberal values in politics are served is in coalition governments. When coalition governments are there, then state power is limited. When coalition governments exist, they function as checks on each other. Which is why I believe the Vajpayee coalition government was to some extent a liberal government, because it rolled back state power. You had actually disinvestment, you had actually moves towards freeing the economy. You had Arun Shourie, who was the minister for disinvestment, and the Manmohan Singh government of UPA 1 was also a liberal, in some senses a liberal coalition. But of course the big liberal moment for India, I believe, are the reforms of 1991, which was again enacted by the minority government of P.V. Narasimha Rao with Manmohan Singh as finance minister, when of course the government enacted the economic reforms and rolled back state power from many aspects of economic life. Now, former RBI Governor YV Reddy has actually shown that majority governments in India, or governments that enjoy a huge mandate and have massive state power, are bad for the economy, because they are so busy imposing their writ and imposing dictatorial decisions like demonetization and faulty GST that they do not tend to the economy. Coalition governments are better for democracy. So I believe on the whole that when there are liberal moments in Indian politics, those are when we have coalition governments. When we have governments with big majorities, those governments are likely to be dictatorial and illiberal. Is there hope in Indian politics for a liberal political party? I'm not sure, but I think the fact that we've had the emergence of a party like the Aam Aadmi Party, which has emerged in this very brutally competitive political environment as a citizens' party, as a party that has grown out of a citizens' movement, I believe that is a reason to hope that in the future there will be more citizen-based parties. But will they take up the cause of freedom? Will they take up the cause of individual freedom? We can't say, because at the moment the official political discourse is handouts, populism, free power, free electricity, free this, free that, and it's the handout culture that dominates the political discourse. So is there scope for a politically liberal force? I think there's scope for politically liberal moments. Can there be a political liberal force? I believe in the future, as populations become more educated, as they become more aware, as group identities become less and less important, caste, religion, region, state, as these identities become more and more important and less important, and voters want performance, and they want performance on the economy, yes, I think then there is scope for a liberal force. At the moment, I think for citizens' power and for the power of civil society to generate a political force, I think we can draw hope from the emergence of the Aam Aadmi Party.